Hello, this is Coding Gicha for full-stack developers. In the previous lesson, I covered how to set up a PHP development environment using Visual Studio Code. While it's useful to view PHP error logs in real time using the Log Viewer extension, it's even more useful to be able to debug PHP while developing. This lesson covers installing Xdebug and configuring it for debugging in Visual Studio Code. To install Xdebug on Windows, you need to know your installed PHP information. You need to download the Xdebug extension that matches your PHP version, thread safety, compiler, and architecture. The binary Xdebug extension for Windows can be downloaded from Xdebug.org. Let's download the Xdebug extension that matches the information I've previously confirmed. Downloading the link file directly requires moving it to the directory that manages the extension files. Therefore, copy the link address and use wget in the terminal to download it directly to the X directory. I'll download it using the file name pattern managed in the extension directory. Let's configure Xdebug in the php.ini file. Windows recognizes DLL files in the X directory as extension files. Therefore, if you also download the Xdebug extension file to the X directory, you can configure it using just the file name rather than the full path. I'll separate the Xdebug related settings into the Xdebug section. If the Xdebug DLL file is in the X directory, you only need to configure the file name. Enabling step-by-step debugging allows you to step through your code and analyze variable values as it executes. I'll configure Xdebug to start when the PHP request starts and before any PHP code is run. The default port Xdebug attempts to connect to the remote host is 9003. You can change the port, but I recommend using 9003. I'll restart the Apache HTTP server service. Now, let's cover debugging in Visual Studio Code. Click the Run and Debug menu in the activity bar on the left. When you click Run and Debug, a notification will appear stating that there is no PHP debugging extension and asking if you want to search the marketplace for a PHP extension. This is because the PHP debug extension must be pre-installed. Let's install the PHP debug extension. Let's go back to the Run and Debug menu in the activity bar on the left. When you click the Run and Debug button, the message about missing PHP extensions will no longer appear, but nothing will happen. This is because the launch.json file must be configured for debugging. Let's select the gicha.org project. Since I kept the default settings for Xdebug, I can use the default launch.json file without any changes. Let's click Start Debugging. The debugging tool may obscure the File List tab, so let's move it to a location that's not in the way. Let's set a breakpoint. When you access the PHP page with a web browser, it will stop at the breakpoint, so the loading mark will continue to cycle. Let's move to the next step using that Step Over button. The timestamp object, which will be used to output the date, now contains all the values. You can also check the values in the debug console. In ISO date format, the time should be expressed as a 2-digit 24-hour clock, so it should be uppercase HH, not lowercase hh. I realized this while editing the recorded video, so the typo remains in the video. Thank you for watching.